Hello, welcome everybody to this webinar for RDA Europe. I'm Sarah Jones from the Digital Curation Centre. We coordinate the work package that is looking at the outputs adoption. What we're going to do in this webinar is talk to you about the outputs adoption scheme that we have and give you an overview of the scheme and how you can apply, and also give you some examples of existing people who've adopted outputs. So just to move on to the next screen, hopefully this will advance. It seems very slow. For some reason the slides aren't advancing. Oh, here we go. So as I mentioned, then I am running the adoption program. I've also had an adoption grant myself in the past in the previous RDA project. We use the metadata standards directory in DMP Online. And what we're going to do after I've introduced the scheme, we're going to hear from Lisa de Leuve from Danse in the Netherlands, who's adopted Quarter Seal, and also from Carlo Maria Zwölf from VAMDC, who's adopted the data citation recommendations. I don't know if you both want to just say hi, or if we should just...
Hi.
That's Lisa and Carlo. Okay, so we'll hear from them shortly. So what I wanted to do first, I'm conscious that not everybody may be that familiar with RDA. So I want to give a very brief overview to what RDA is, how it works, and the outputs and recommendations, because that's really what this scheme is structured around. So RDA is an international member-based organisation, has 7,900 members now, representing 137 different countries. So it's got very wide and broad uptake in the few years it's been running. And the aim of RDA is to build the social and technical bridges that enable open data sharing. So if we're wanting to share our content, it's not just the technical services we need, it's all of the policies and the practices and the kind of the culture of sharing. And RDA is trying to address both of those aspects. And the vision is that researchers and innovators will be openly sharing their data across all boundaries, across different disciplines, different countries, so that they can address those grand challenges of society. So the way that RDA works in a quick overview is that people will propose ideas. So members will come together and identify topics of mutual interest, and they will submit case statements for approval. And then those case statements will be approved and interest groups and working groups will form. And this is where the main work of RDA happens. There are groups that run for different lengths of time. Working groups are typically 12 to 18 months. And different meetings will take place virtually and at plenaries to do the work to address those challenges that were identified in the case statements. And this is really how the work of RDA is delivered. So those groups will produce different outputs and recommendations, and those outputs and recommendations get reviewed by the TAB and also by the community, the RDA members. And what we're really focusing on here is how we take those outputs further. So obviously, people will find these outputs, they'll hear about them at plenaries, and they'll start using them. And this grant scheme is to support that adoption. And what you'll find is that some outputs inspire further rounds of work. So there will be some groups like the Metadata Standards Directory group that go on to do subsequent phases of work. So this is essentially how the RDA cycle of activity happens. So to just give you a quick overview of the recommendations and outputs, they address a really broad range of different things. There are registries for persistent identifiers and data types. There are policy templates, audit methodologies, different standards directories and curricula, different outputs addressing topics like interoperability and cross-linking and lots of different topics. And a number of these recommendations have also been endorsed as ICT technical specifications. So that's adding another layer of formalization and again, assisting in the adoption. And you can get a link to all the recommendations and outputs at the bottom of the slide here. You'll see we have these nice little cards that if you come to an RDA event, you can pick up. You can also download them from the website where you can get the overview of the different outputs, what this solution is addressing, and it will give you ideas about how you can adopt them. So within RDA Europe, we have a number of grant schemes. I'll focus on the adoption, but just to give you an overview of other things we do have nodes, which are large grants for countries or regions that can act as intermediaries between the global RDA and their local needs. We have travel bursaries to support early career researchers and experts to go to plenaries. We have an ambassador program, which actually the second wave of just opened the other day. This is about supporting individuals to be ambassadors within their particular domain and to spread the RDA messages. I've got a picture of Tamea there who's running that program. And what we'll be focusing on today is the adoption grants. And these are organisational awards of up to €15,000 for different projects to adopt RDA outputs and recommendations. Now, one thing I want to flag about the RDA Europe project is that it is supported by the European Commission, and it's for organisations within EU member states and associated countries. And we have on various schemes had applications that unfortunately we've had to discount because they're ineligible. So I would encourage people to check the eligibility criteria before they apply. I don't want you to waste your time putting in a really great proposal and then find that you're in the States or you're in Africa and actually we can't support you. So to give you an overview of the adoption scheme, we're going to be supporting 8 projects up to a maximum of €15,000 each. And those projects should be short and focused activities that run for up to 12 months. And what we're focusing on is the adoption of outputs in a way that enables us to provide lessons to other potential adopters. So we don't want something that's so niche that there's not going to be a potential for others to use it or to learn from it. And the deadline for submitting applications is the 4th of March, so you've got just over a week left. I assume many of you may have seen the scheme already, but we'll give you more information on it, and there's still plenty of time to apply. So the key criteria on the adoption scheme is that you have to adopt one or more RDA recommendations or outputs. So you'll see from the slide I shared earlier, there's a whole list of them. You can take just one, or you could take a number of related ones that come together. And you should have sufficient knowledge to be able to implement that without significant assistance. So ideally, you'd already be aware of the output, or you'd have enough background or have done enough background research to be able to run with that. Now, naturally, interest group and working group chairs may assist you and may work with you, but you can't expect that support. And if you are looking for that support, you have to have liaised with them in advance and write that into your application. You have to be adding value to the RDA output. So really we want to see you develop use cases, some guidelines on adoption of that output, recommendations for the way in which the output could be improved based on your adoption case and what you found worked and didn't. And you also have to demonstrate that there's appropriate co-funding, so either person effort or some kind of in-kind contribution or match funding. There are a few basic expectations of award holders. We expect you to present your adoption case in a webinar and or at a plenary meeting. So you should be talking about the work that you're doing. We also expect you to provide written case studies and final reports. We have a special collection in the CoData journal as well. So that's a venue in which you can publish a more detailed peer-reviewed paper about your adoption case. And the results that you generate have to be available for at least 4 years after the end of the project. Now, there are a number of ways in which you could strengthen your application. Naturally, you should follow the guidelines and meet the required criteria. But there are a couple of things we note in the call that will be seen as a plus. So if you were to focus on the RDA ICT technical specifications, that is an advantage. And if you're doing something that's cross-disciplinary or multidisciplinary, those projects would also be favoured. So essentially what I would advise you to do is to consider how your proposal could be more impactful. So there are 4 criteria for evaluation, which I'll talk through at the end of the presentation. But essentially, if you try and have as broadly applicable a use case as possible, that's going to be in your favour. If you show that it's not just your university or your organisation, it's a number of different organizations that could adopt the output in the same way, or potentially it's for broader communities, not just your individual discipline. It's really great if you can show wide and deep community engagement. So you need to have contacts with all the relevant stakeholders to be able to do your adoption case and to be able to test it with that community of users. Obviously, impact is important, and it's great if you can show lots of potential and also likely impact. So you've got to be realistic about what the outcomes are going to be and what kind of effect you're going to have on that community of users. And we'd like to see really strong dissemination and sustainability plans so that the work lives on. So you should be promoting what you're doing, sharing information about that, making sure you put information out to lots of different channels so that people know about your work and can then adopt it themselves and can learn lessons from you. So the basics of how to apply are to go to the grants portal, which is at this link. This will take you to the page about the adoption scheme. And you'll probably need to register for this. This is actually a separate portal to the RDA membership. So even if you're an RDA member, you may need to register separately if you haven't applied for another RDA Europe grant. And then you can draft your application in multiple stages. You can save and return to the form. There are only 12 questions, but some of those questions, obviously are asking for your justification and your case and what impact you think you will have. So you might want to take time to reflect on those. But you can open up your application and come back to it and submit it closer to the deadline. The deadline is the 4th of March at 5 European time. And you'll see on the page, there's just a basic submit your application to the call button, which you need to follow. In terms of what happens next, the review and the granting process, the applications will be marked by multiple independent evaluators. We actually have an open call for evaluators too, and we've got a whole body of evaluators now who do these reviews for us. And they will make a recommendation to the RDA Europe Grants Committee. And we'll review that, and potentially, if necessary, we will add some balancing criteria. So if we get, 10 really strong applications from France, we're unlikely to fund everything in one country. So we may need to apply some balancing criteria. All the applicants will be notified of the outcome by the 4th of April, so it's a month for us to do the reviews. And the successful applicants will then be contracted with the University of Göttingen, and that contract will be with the lead applicants organisation only. So you might be doing something in collaboration, but we are only funding one organisation. So to go on to the evaluation criteria, there are 4 areas that you'll be assessed on: the use case, the community connections, the impact, and sustainability and communication. So in terms of the use case, this is 20% of your score. We want a really strong and well thought through case that generates clear value to the RDA and to the community. And you should have a detailed work plan with a realistic time frame for implementing and testing your adoption case. In terms of the community connections, this is about showing that you're addressing a genuine need and that what you're producing is a usable output, but also that you have those relevant connections. You have a defined community to which you've got strong links. So we know that you have the relevant contacts to reach out to develop, the idea and to implement it and to test it. The potential impact is a slightly higher score. This is 30%. And here, as I mentioned before, really what you want to show is all the ways in which your proposal is generating greater impact. So you want to potentially show that you've got a large community that you're working with, that there's going to be some kind of transformative change, that it's cross-disciplinary, or that you're adopting multiple outputs, have a strong network of collaborators, and a clear reuse potential by others after your use case. And then the final point is the communication and sustainability. And again, this is 30% because we want to ensure that things have impact going forward. We'd like to see a wide range of dissemination approaches. You're required to either give a webinar or speak at a plenary, but you should be doing as much as you can. So developing case studies and guides or technical specifications, perhaps generating videos or training materials, or publishing a paper in the co-data collection that we have. We would like to see all outputs openly licensed. That might not be feasible. If it isn't, please do justify why in your proposal. And you should also be sustaining it for a minimum of 4 years, ideally longer, but again, explain your plans in the proposal. So that was all I wanted to say to give you a run through of the scheme. What I'm hoping to do now is to hand over to Lisa first and then to Carlo, so we can hopefully help you generate some ideas from their examples of the adoption cases. So I'll just click to change the presenter, and hopefully you will see Lisa's slide and Lisa's screen in a minute. There we go. Excellent. So take it away, Lisa.
Thank you, Sarah, for that introduction. Hi all, my name is Lisa de Leeuw and I work for Data Archiving and Network Services, which is Danse for short. And I'll be presenting the RDA adoption story on the Core Trust Seal certification we went through. Basically, I want to give you some background on who we are first and then go into the process that we went through. Danse is the Netherlands Institute for Permanent Access to Digital Research Resources, and we encourage researchers to make their digital research data and related outputs findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Yes, that's fair. We provide expert advice and certified services. Our core services are Data Personnel, which is for short-term data management. We have EASY, our long-term archive, and Narcis, the national portal for research information. By participating in international projects, networks, and research, Danse contributes to continued innovation on the global scientific data infrastructure. Open if possible and protected where necessary is our motto. Danse is an institute of the Dutch Academy of the KNAW and the funding organization MBO. Our mission is to promote and provide permanent access to digital research information. Danse is and has always been heavily involved in creating and achieving certification for trustworthiness of digital repositories. We are one of the founding fathers of the Data Seal of Approval and acquired our first DSA certification in 2011. It was renewed in 2013 and prolonged in 2016. Next to that, we acquired World Data System certification in 2015 and the Nestor DIN seal in 2016. This was complemented in 2018 by the Core Trust seal. So over the years, we went through the process of acquiring certification with two goals. Firstly, to show our stakeholders the trustworthiness of our repository, and secondly, to improve our internal processes and update our documentation. Preparing for certification is a perfect opportunity to raise the bar and reinforce collaboration between our archive, IT, policy, and also legal departments. Danse's primary target group includes scientific researchers with a focus on social sciences and humanities, and to a lesser extent, public and private organizations that carry out research, which is either commissioned by national or local authorities. They are both data producers and data users. Researchers in training, for instance, doctoral students, belong to this primary target group as well. Data with a scientific significance collected by companies such as polling organizations and archaeological companies are also welcome. Besides researchers and research organizations, journalists and the wider public are invited to use our data services, including our repository. A substantial part of our data sets are available open access. So what was our challenge? Why did we do this? Danse wants to show the trustworthiness of its repository to its users and also other stakeholders, thereby creating confidence and having a way to differentiate our repositories from others in the field. As digital preservation is part of our mission, we would like to raise awareness for this subject as well. Not being certified makes it harder to demonstrate to researchers and research support staff why trustworthy digital repositories are essential for keeping their research data reusable or even fair. Like I said, findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable in the long term. Funders are also getting stricter where data or research data is deposited and that they remain well preserved over a longer term. So not being a trusted digital repository could stop the inflow of data into our repository, as depositors would choose another certified repository instead. So we adopted the RDA recommendation for audit and certification catalogs for repositories. How do we get to RDA as a potential supporter? We, Danse, have been very active in the RDA since the beginning, amongst others by co-chairing or participating in working groups and interest groups, because we appreciate the grassroots approach and global coverage provided by the RDA. We organized the fourth RDA plenary in September 2014 in Amsterdam, and Dan's Deputy Director, Ingrid Dillo, she has been active in the TAB, has been the acting Secretary General for the RDA in 2017 to 2018, and is now a member of the RDA Council. So this long-standing involvement in the RDA made it obvious for us to collaborate on certification requirements for data repositories through the RDA. So the recommendation that we took was the repository audit and certification catalogs, which is a two-part recommendation produced by one of the interest groups in the RDA. It harmonized common procedures and requirements for certification for repositories at the basic level, drawing from procedures and requirements already put in place by the Data Seal Approval and the World Data System. And based on this effort, they were merged within this working group into the Core Trust Seal. Danse has used the Core Trust Seal to sustain and display its reputation as trustworthy digital repository in a transparent way, which induces stakeholders' confidence and differentiates us from others, as I said before. At the same time, it helps us raise awareness on digital preservation and the importance of long-term availability of data for reuse. Next to that, the procedure of getting certified improves internal but also external communication on our overall mission and goals, but it also has a positive effects on our processes and procedures, making them even more effective and efficient. So what are the benefits? In 2017, Danse has written a self-assessment on the basis of the 16 requirements of the Core Trust Seal, and we received certification in April 2018. Similar to previous occasions where we wanted to acquire certification for our repository, we have done so for the following reasons. First, to promote a repository as a trustworthy digital repository, increasing our stakeholder confidence by showing we are a reliable partner for funders, depositors, and users of data. Next to that, to have a transparent way to prove that we are a trustworthy digital repository. And we would like to differentiate ourselves from others. One of our core missions is to raise awareness on digital preservation, and this helps too. Next to that, we wanted to check, improve, and update our policy and workflow documents, and for instance, our long-term preservation plan, because this is one of the requirements. Reevaluate and make improvements to our technical solutions and processes for the long-term preservation. And going through the certification process is a very good team building exercise because it brings people from different departments together with a common goal. So what was the process we went through? The method is basically you write a self-assessment, which we started in August 2017, and we submitted it to the board in September, so it took a while to write it. The self-assessment was then reviewed by the board and sent back to us with comments on the requirements we needed to elaborate on further or maybe improve a little bit. The self-assessment was sent back and forth about 3 times in total before the board actually approved our application, and this process helps you make your self-evaluation more transparent, but also better and more understandable for the outside world. So after 3 times, the board awarded us the Core Trust Seal, which was in April 2018. And the Danse self-assessment for easy and our Core Trust Seal review by the board is available online on the website of Core Trust Seal. Several Danse staff were involved in the process, and for most of them, collecting and providing the evidence for the self-assessment is interwoven into their primary task. So that makes it hard to identify what part of their time was especially devoted to the Core Trust Seal certification, but we made an estimate anyway. So the efforts of going through getting certification for Core Trust Seal basically was on 4 different topics. The first one was related to our policies, not only regarding the repository, but also regarding the organization, because it's good to give the context in which you're archiving data and how you do that. The second one was related to the technical infrastructure of our repository, for instance, on internal consultation and design, on the development and also documentation of it. The third one was related to the text of the self-assessment itself, because we went through the process before with Data Seal approval and also World Data System. We used the old assessments and improved the text that we submitted before. But we also had to write new text because we are in an ever-evolving environment. And yeah, we try to adapt to the changes as much as possible when they happen. Next to that, adapting text of documents which are offered in support of Core Trust Seal criteria also takes some time, as well as adapting text on the Danse website, because we want to support our claims to certain compliance levels that we adhere to as transparent as possible. And of course, there's a lot of internal consultation about the text and what they should look like. And the fourth pillar was basically project management, trying to get all these eggs in one basket and making sure that we work together and get there. So to conclude, we estimate the net effort, of applying for Core Trust Seal certification is about 250 hours, which we consider quite acceptable every few years. Clearly, the effort required correlates with the pursued levels of compliance. It takes less time to provide an up-to-date description of the repository state of the art than, for instance, to design and implement major improvements of the technical infrastructure. Finally, it is good to note that the application process both stimulates and is stimulated by the everyday repository processes. So what was the technical challenge that the output solved? Basically, getting certified by Core Trust Seal doesn't solve technical requirements by actually providing technical challenges, by providing technical solutions, but it does give you a context in which to think about the technical challenges you face. Because Core Trust Seal publishes all the approved self-assessments on their website, it's a database of knowledge, and you can look at how peers have solved similar challenges that you run into, and they are freely accessible, so they can be used to inspire solutions in your own domain or repository. Furthermore, the OIS reference model is used as a base for the Core Trust Seal requirements, so it provides a common framework and a common language when you are working on certification. So what advice would I give, or would Danse give actually? What are the lessons that we learned from the adoption process? As the application for certification of our repository is an exercise that Danse repeats at regular intervals, we are quite at home in the procedure, but we would like to make the following recommendations to, well, first-time or applicants. Without submitting a self-assessment, the Core Trust 2 requirements can be used as an internal benchmark to assess the repository state of the art, as the requirements and the reviewer's guide that is used to look at if you adhere or not are freely accessible on the Core Trust Seal website. Furthermore, like I said, all the approved self-assessments of repositories are available. So this means you can access self-assessments of related repositories in your field, which can be used for inspiration or finding solutions to common problems, and it will help you prepare for the official submission. Higher management should be the driving and connecting force disseminating the importance of trustworthiness through certification in the entire organization, making resources available when and where necessary, and taking strategic decisions on needed improvements, if any, of course. Acquiring certification is a team effort, and it works best if everyone within the repository is on board. It's a great team building exercise. And especially first-time applications require a lot of effort depending on the maturity of the documentations of processes and procedures. Often when you start a certification procedure, you find that the process and procedures used within your repository are very well thought out, but not always documented sufficiently, as a lot of knowledge is in people's heads and not on paper. Oh, that went too fast. Furthermore, seeking certification can lead to the need for updating and/or changing the design and implementation of major improvements for the technical infrastructure. This could take a lot of time that is not necessarily part of the certification process, but it does need to be taken into consideration when starting the process. Next to that, as the certification allows different levels for compliance to requirements, it could be that you identify areas that need or want improvement through the certification process. In the self-assessment, you can state that this work is in progress and it will be ready by the next certification round in 3 years. So you don't have to be perfect to start off with, kind of thing. You can say, okay, we're in this stage and we are working towards the next. Getting certification at regular intervals strengthens and develops your repository, and it helps it keep it relevant for the future. So it's something that we just recommend that you should do. Certification of your repository is not a one-off exercise. In the ever-changing environment we work in, we recommend to go through the process on a regular basis, as stated. The Core Trust Seal certification, for instance, is valid for a period of 3 years, after which it needs to be reviewed. We definitely recommend other repositories to get certified, or at least to use the requirements as an internal benchmark to check the quality and sustainability of the repository service, its processes, and also its staff. Clearly, certification is not something you do to impress other repositories. On the contrary, Science Europe, the organization of research funding and research performing organizations in Europe, has developed criteria for the selection of trustworthy repositories. These criteria contain a recommendation that repositories that are not yet certified seek certification. We can only encourage repositories to prepare for this and to benefit, like us, from the boost that a certification process can give to internal communication and collaboration, on top of course, raising the level of trustworthiness. Thank you for your time. Are there any questions, or are we doing those afterwards, Sarah?
If anyone has direct questions about the Core Trust Seal and using that, then by all means either raise your hand, or if you've got a microphone, you can unmute yourself, I think, or I could potentially unmute you. But otherwise, if we hand over to Carlo, and then we can take some general questions about the scheme and how you can adopt outputs at the end. But that was fantastic. Thank you very much, Lisa.
Thank you.
So shall I move over to Carlo? So Carlo, hopefully you will get a an option now to share your screen. Has it done that? Yep. Okay. Okay, so Carlo is from the Virtual Atomic and Molecular Data Center. And if you would like to talk us through your example of implementing the data citation and Scholix framework, that would be great. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for the introduction. So we said I represent the Virtual Atomic and Molecular Data Center Consortium, and we joined the RDA in 2014. And during these 2 last years, we implemented both data citation and Scholix recommendation. Before going on, a quick introduction of what VAMDC is. VAMDC is a distributed global infrastructure for sharing atomic and molecular data. This infrastructure has been built by 2 FP7 EU grants, and it is distributed from an architectural point of view. VAMDC is a distributed set with no central management system, and DV for VAMDC for virtual means that the infrastructure does not contain data. In other words, it is a middleware for exposing in a unified way a set of heterogeneous autonomous databases. So we provide a wrapping software which transforms existing autonomous databases into a VAMDC federated resource, accepting query in a standard grammar and serving standardized output file. Scientists usually cite the databases, not the data producers. So what we experienced during the operation with VAMDC is that when people write a scientific paper extracting data from a given database, they usually cite the database, not the data producers. So this was an issue because data producers are not receiving bibliographic credits, and all this data citation problem was something which was really a blocking point at VAMDC, because if data producers do not want to put any more data into repositories, there will be no data at some days, and the repository won't be updated. So data citation was an issue for VAMDC, and we started working with the Research Data Alliance in 2014 and joined the data citation working group as an early pilot. But the data citation recommendation from the RDA comes for standalone databases and warehouses. As I said, VAMDC is a distributed set. So in the first phase from 2014 to 2017, we validated the recommendation from the conceptual point of view. In other words, we asked ourselves if the recommendation contained blocking point for adapting it to the VAMDC distributed infrastructure. We found no blocking points. So we implemented during 2017 the data citation recommendation, and the RDA EU3 grant, the RDA EU3 project funded an adoption grant for this implementation. From the technical point of view, the VAMDC Query Store is a kind of a smart log service, and all the technical details are contained with the source code at this GitHub repository. So the technical challenge was to adapt this recommendation made for standalone cases in our distributed and asynchronous set. This was something really interesting from the technical point of view. It was the main challenge. From the administrative side, we received 15 kilo euros from RDA EU3 for helping the development effort, and this corresponds to a third of the total cost of the development. The deliverable for this project were the source code plus the documentation plus the operational deployed services. And from the legal aspect, for fitting the EU requirements, the source code needed to be published in an open repository and protected by a free license. So we choose GitHub with an open license, and the project is available there for as long as GitHub will work, I hope. Then we go further. This implementation is after the grant received by the RDA EU free project, but we still implementing new feature on the query store, because we discovered that the query store, which is the core of the data citation implementation, is a great technical hub for innovative development. And we connected the query store with Zenodo Open Science repository. And since Zenodo implements Scolix and VamDC inherit from Zenodo the Scolix capabilities. So VamDC indirectly implemented Scolix via Zenodo. This success here is that when you cite a VamDC extracted data using the query store feature, it is the data producer which receives directly bibliographic credits through the Scolix infrastructure. On another side, we implemented a digital certification based on blockchain technology for checking the data quality and the data integrity, and this is made in cooperation with fireblock.io. I leave here a list of references. This one is the last article which appeared in the Data Science Journal on the RDA special issues, and these two other are more related to atomic physics. And also there is an entry on the adoption story in RDA website. And during the previous presentation, they mentioned that in the framework of this grant, you should provide webinars and demonstration. So this first link is for the webinar I gave to RDA by explaining the technical aspect of our adoption and implementation, and the other is a short screencast of the all integrated solution which show all the feature of the query store today. Thank you for your attention, and I will be happy to answer to your questions.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, Carlo. And I think a great example of essentially how you can apply for a grant and then deliver it, and the kinds of things you can do during your grant to make sure that people are aware and can learn from your lessons. Okay, so I'd invite everyone, we haven't got any questions in the chat or the question panel yet, but I'd invite people to submit questions, or if you would like to raise your hand and speak out a question, by all means do, and we can take those. I can move the presenter back to me, and then what you will hopefully see, if I open up the questions, I can bring this pane up when questions come in. Okay, so how will RDA be in contact with approved projects during the kind of quarter year period on evaluating the progress or spending, for example? So these projects can run for up to a year, so they are quite short projects. You will obviously be contacted in that first period for the grant administration. And then what we will ask for is just periodic reports. So it will essentially depend on your work plan, what is sensible. There may be a very small idea that somebody puts in. You don't necessarily need to apply for the full 15,000. It might be something that you think you could do within, you know, a 3 to 6 month period, and you actually just want a very small amount of money. In that case, we would probably just maybe have like a small call or like a very brief interim report with you at the midway point, and then the final reporting. But I think typically you can expect an interim report and then the final reporting. And that interim report will be very brief. We're not expecting you to submit lots of administrative details to us. What we're really focusing on is the fact that you do the adoption, but also that you support others to adopt. So we're more keen to see that you do the dissemination, that you do the webinars, and the reporting is fairly lightweight. And that's how it was in the RDA 3 project. I think the final report I submitted was, I don't know, 4 or 5 pages, and I assume the same, Carlo, for you. So I'll just undock this panel to see if there's other questions. Can we give a little bit more on the eligible costs? So you can cover staffing time in that. You, depending on what your adoption is, it might be appropriate to hold some kind of events, or particularly things like user group sessions to identify requirements. So there could be costs around that. There could be some kind of technical costs, depending again on the nature of the adoption. One thing I would flag here is that we do ask for in-kind contributions as well. So it might be that there are some things that it's easier for you to put in kind, and other things where you would want to use the grant money to support that because it's harder to cover in other means. I think Katerina is on the line. I don't know if you have a view from Göttingen that you want to bring up about the actual contracting process and anything that could throw up issues in terms of eligible costs. Or maybe Katerina's no longer on the line. Let me just have a quick look through the attendees. Okay. I'll move on to the next question. So who is supposed to sign the contract? An organization, an individual person? If the organization, what role? So essentially you will list a project lead, and that project lead has to be at an organization. So the grant money will go to an organization, but there should be a named individual that we're working with. It's effectively like somebody you'd name as a PI on a grant, but unlike the ambassador grants, which are actually for individuals, you know, the funds have to be transferred to an organization, and it's one organization. Katerina's just saying she can't unmute herself, so I'm just going to try and unmute Katerina, and then she can come in on this too. There you go, Katerina, you're hopefully unmuted now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
You can speak about the technicalities of eligibility and the contracting more than I can. I don't know if you can all see these questions in the middle of the screen.
No, for some reason I can't, and I couldn't unmute myself either. So
okay. So what I will do, sorry, if you're able to respond to it, or do you want me to read the question out to you again?
I'll just quickly add to what you said before. So yeah, you can cover work time, you can cover travel time and other costs, which might be the case. You cannot put in overhead costs, and you cannot put in subcontracting. So it's only direct costs for which you need to have all the receipts. Like Sarah said, we do ask you for some kind of in-kind contribution, and also, like we heard in the presentation, one of the adoption grant actually only covered 1/3 of the real costs. So you might want to think about what your institution can cover. Also, I'd like to point out, if you look at the application form, the part where there are the questions about the resources, there is a template, an Excel file available there, which you can download and which might help you to organize your budget proposal. So please use that. It's not obligatory in your application, but it might help you. Okay, Sarah?
Okay, so I have been copying questions out so that you can hopefully all see questions that are coming in. So a lot of these initial ones were about the eligible costs, and I think those are probably covered from what myself and Katerina has said. And do look at that template. If you have other questions that come up, by all means email them into us as you're preparing your proposal. I'll maybe move on to this next question. Carlo had said they took 3 years to validate the recommendation internally. If we submit now, when should we or when could we start the adoption work? Can we start the starting date, choose the starting date of the work plan? So effectively, yes, it's down to you when you start. We'll review them within the month, and obviously there's a little bit of time for contracting, but hopefully we can do that fairly quickly. So I would say you could start within the month. There will be obviously. I mean, you'll probably have some in-kind contributions, so it might be that you're able to put some effort on it from your own end and get it started while we're doing that contracting. But yeah, you can choose that start date. We have obviously an end date to the project as a whole that we have to meet, but that's May 2021. March 2021, May 2021, I can't remember now.
End of May 2020.
2020. Yeah. Okay. Too many different projects.
Sorry, just for giving a detail, we applied for the grant after this 3-year period. We applied when we were sure to be able to implement the recommendation in our case. So this 3-year period was before the RDA Europe project.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you very much, Carlo. So yeah, that's actually a good point, because a lot of times you may have done some existing work and the adoption grant builds on that. So I expect many of you are already members of RDA. You might have been involved in some of these working groups. You might have actually been involved in contributing to the development of some of the outputs. So this can be work that enhances something you've already been doing and validates it and takes it further forward. And that's a really good thing to see. One question here about eligibility. Somebody who recently got an ambassador award and they're considering applying for the implementation grant within their organization. Is that possible? I can't remember whether that excludes you or not, Tamea. Do you know? Or I might have to unmute Tamea because she probably can't speak. I know our project partners can't. There you go, Tamea. I've just unmuted you. Do you remember whether ambassadors can apply?
We were actually having a private discussion on this, since the combination between the two is not that clear. So basically, we know that any funded personnel or any personnel that is working on the project and the nodes is not eligible. But in this case, since the ambassador would be also listed as a core personnel for the adoption project, then we think that in general it's not eligible.
Yeah.
As a general rule, we don't encourage. It's not that we don't encourage. We think that having 2 grants at the same time is not a very good practice for us, because we're encouraging very balanced and wide participation.
And across we have a number of different grant schemes, but what we're trying to do is to broaden out the inputs in RDA. So we have nodes funded in different countries or regions, and there may well be ambassadors in the same country, and they may well collaborate, but we don't really want to be funding the same individuals to do multiple things, and we want to try and make sure that lots of different people have the opportunity to take part.
This doesn't mean, though, that the organization of the ambassador should not apply. You should apply and engage a team from your organization that can do the adoption grant, and you can do support work actually under your ambassador mandate for the adoption case. it's just important to separate things and
Yeah.
not get funded for the same activities, or avoid these sort of gray areas for
Yeah.
reporting's sake as well.
That's a really good point, actually. So, I mean, and if you were to apply for the grant in your own right as an ambassador, it could count. Well, you're not really eligible, so it does count against you. But if you are associated with that project and supporting that project, that would count under the impact criteria. So it's a way to actually enhance your chances if it's another person who is engaged, you know, so as in your role as ambassador, you've engaged somebody else to get involved in RDA and to do an adoption, and you're supporting it. That's a way to really show join up and the fact that you're spreading the seeds and building that community. So that would be a good impact measure and something to certainly flag in the application. One question here about the, sorry, go on, Tamir.
And I'll stop. If there are any other similar situations, please feel free to contact us at the email address that Sarah's mentioned earlier. We'll try to clarify these points and make suggestions so that you meet the eligibility criteria and you also manage to submit an application.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much, Tamaya. So there's a couple of other questions that have come in. So one from GoFair, the implementation network co-operators. They're going to be launching the work of their implementation network, and are wondering whether the kickoff would be funded. So no, not as a event separately. What we're really looking for is people to take RDA outputs and to adopt them and to show, you know, solid reasons why that's a good use case and a big community that's been affected by that adoption. So to kind of launch some parallel work wouldn't fit the criteria. Another question about eligibility, whether EC projects seeking transition to sustainability would be eligible to apply. I'm struggling to see a way in which that would fit. Again, this scheme's about adopting outputs. So if adopting one of the RDA outputs helped your sustainability somehow, then, you know, it could probably fly, but I think it'd be quite a hard case to make. So the focus is really on taking the content from RDA and using it in, you know, in your own organizations, in your own research areas, and showing examples like we've had from Carlo and Lisa about how that's then been useful within that organization. So either you've certified a repository using the Cortra seal, or you've taken frameworks, the data citation recommendations and Scholix, and you've improved this resource for all, and you're addressing a very clear need. So as Carlo said, you know, there was the issue that people were citing the database, not the authors, and they've managed to overcome that by adopting the outputs. And that's what we really want to see. We want to see that we're having an impact and improving things for the research community. Okay, I think that was probably the last question, and we're coming close to the hour. If you have any more questions, do submit them to us. You'll see in this Google Doc, I've put my slides online. We do have Lisa and Carlo's as well. We'll make sure those are shared. And obviously, you've got the links in those to additional outputs about the Cortra seal and the kind of the demos and the webinars that the projects have given in the past. Thank you all for attending. I hope we've answered some of your questions. If you have others in this coming week as you pull together applications, please do reach out to us and we'll help with those. And good luck with your proposals. I think there might have been a hand raised then, or maybe I'll just double check. I think it went down, so hopefully you're all okay. Thank you for joining. We have recorded this session, so the recording will go online. So we'll speak to you all soon. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.